Hello and welcome to the live stream Q&A for Wisdom Gone Wild. My name is Arjang Zafar. I am a programming director at the Philadelphia Asian American Film Festival, and I'm here with director Rea Tajiri. Rea, would you like to introduce yourself a bit?
Hi, I'm Rea Tajiri. I'm the director and producer for Wisdom Gone Wild, which is a documentary feature.
Thank you. So yeah, let's just get right into it. To start, can you tell us, kind of just generally speaking, how you developed the idea for this film?
hmm Yeah, actually, so I was a caregiver for my mother for about 16 years. And during that time, in the beginning, people would say, oh, you really should make a film about this, because I would kind of, relay some stories, and the whole process of caregiving was really interesting. And I think people found it, what I would share with them, they would find it very profound. And so I hesitated, but I was also filming the whole time, just because I was trying to share things with family back home, and I was going back and forth. I was living in New York, so I was flying. My mother's in Los Angeles. I'd fly back and forth, and I'd film things, and sometimes I would send little clips to people. And then just over time, I think I just realized that it was a significant story to tell. And I did a test in I think 2012, 2014. I went to the museum. I hired a DP for the day, and we kind of had one of those lucky happenstances, which is that we went out into the courtyard. There was a yellow installation with streamers, and just kind of something really unusual happened, where everything just kind of came together in this beautiful way. And there were children inside. The children were really drawn to my mother. My mother was engaged by the children, and they were this back and forth. And it was so lovely visually. And we filmed it, and we just said, okay, well, I think this is going to work. So, yeah.
And how was your approach in just like how you decided to tell the story influenced by your previous work, if it was at all?
Um, I don't think I thought about it that way so much. I
Yeah.
think it was just more the footage itself, because
Okay.
everything was sort of fragmented. It was hard to kind of just, do something verite requires a lot of, time, and you have to really have, I think, support in some way, just to be able to hire people, to be consistent, to show up every day for a period of time, and then you're trying to kind of find the story as you're shooting. So I knew that the storytelling would be kind of like, kind of, the reality is that you can't really keep something really consistently in this kind of situation. You're caregiving. There are days, if I hired somebody on a certain day and my mother decided not to get out of bed, then I lost that day, and, you could sit by the bed filming. And so, which, a couple times I did do, but, so those are some of the conditions, right? So I kind of knew I had to surrender to that particular given. And so that kind of dictated, and the structure a little bit, and what we could do. And then I decided to rely a lot on archive, because we had a lot of beautiful archival photos from my dad. And I found some archive that I had shot, just in the 80s and 90s, just with the whatever it was, the format back then. And then that became part of the story too, just the back and forth in time, and how people change, what people are like in different decades of their lives, different identities, different ways of being.
Yeah. Um, well, since you touched on this, can you elaborate a bit on like your sort of process of collecting archival materials, home movies and whatever else?
Collecting the archival materials.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I, had to kind of like dig around in the attic kind of thing, and like, oh, I'd find, oh yeah, here's some tapes. Wow. Then I had to pay for the transfers, and then, look at them. And there were some, really interesting things. And then it's just sort of deciding, well, what's going to really fit and what's not. But that's you don't know that until you sit down and you just start editing and working with it. And there's a lot of things we had to leave behind. But towards the very end, when we were trying to finish, I knew it was so weird. I knew in the back of my mind that there was some photos I had copied years ago out of my mother's sister's album. And it was like from 1989. And I never processed them, and they were negatives. I had them as negatives, but I never printed them. Okay, are we back? Do you hear me? Sorry,
Yeah,
there was a
we're
little
good.
glitch there.
You cut out for a second, but I think we're good.
Are we still on? I can't tell. Sorry.
We're on. Okay. Well, let's just, I guess, give it a second and hope that Rea is able to connect again. Just bear with us if you're watching.
I'm trying to log back on. There we go.
Okay, you're back. You're back. Great.
I found these photographs from an album from 1989. They were my aunt's, my mother. It was photos of my mother as a kid, and I actually don't know how they got the photos because they were very poor. They didn't have a camera. I think an uncle had a camera. There's a guy with a camera in one of the shots, and I think that's my mother's uncle or something. But those were really amazing because they're also a document of what Japanese farm life looked like in Salinas in the 20s and 30s. So yeah. Can you hear me still?
Would you? Yeah, I can hear you. Absolutely. Would you say that this is your most personal film?
Probably. I think History and Memory is a very personal film, but I think there's a lot that this touches on that I still even can't really fathom. Like every once in a while, I'll go, "Oh, everybody's gonna know my mother's nickname for me was, oh, I'm lying sprawled out on a bed asleep." And my mom, like just these very. I try not to think about it, but yeah, it's a very personal film.
Okay. Well, I was gonna ask if you don't mind kind of taking us through maybe your emotional journey of doing such an exposing, like, vulnerable film. But if you don't have to answer that if you don't feel super.
I can answer just very broadly.
Okay.
I mean, it's very difficult to do personal films, and sometimes people think it's either indulgent or they think, oh, well, you have all the material, so it's easy to do that. Anybody can do that, but it's actually, I mean, you have to kind of relive some of this. There's certain things you don't want to reveal. There's certain things you do want to reveal, and that are important, or things you're holding on to. You really need a good editor. It's hard to know, certain times people like that. My producer or the editor would push me to reveal things, and I wasn't sure it was the right thing to do. And then sometimes I would cave in and see that story-wise it was the right thing. It's just a lot of different negotiations one has to do. And then there's, of course, one's family and what they feel comfortable with. My mother had passed away by the time I was editing, so she didn't get to weigh in, but I trust that she was all good with everything. So yeah. I mean, had she been alive, I don't know. What it would have been like. And then, there's a lot of questions. If someone has dementia, do they really understand consent? I believe that during the filming, she understood what was going on, because there were times she didn't want me to film. There were times when she deliberately performed things for us. So, it was a kind of interesting process that way. Yeah. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how did sort of the music and song element of the film being end up becoming such an integral part of it?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a couple of things. Like in my films, I do really the music is really important, and I I rarely work with a straightforward composer. I think in Lordville, I had somebody do sort of like, I had sound design and elements and recordings of water and wind and all sorts of sounds I collected, and that was for a film that was takes place in upstate New York, and and then I put it together, and then I worked with a sort of a composer to kind of create a musical composition out of those elements. But this time was with really working with music, and I had a list, a sound, like a Spotify list of references, of musical references, and I had some ideas, and I worked with my cousin, who's maybe this is the second film he's composed for. He worked as a music supervisor, and he's a musician, but his name is Shakuru Tajiri, and we kind of had a back and forth. We spotted the film, went through scene by scene. We talked about emotions and moods and ideas. One thing is that I didn't want the music to be the kind of music that dictates how the viewer should feel. And it's tricky finding the balance, and I didn't want it to be overly sentimental or too sweet. And we went back and forth. Sometimes he would give me things, and I would just literally take it apart. I would just say, well, I want it to be like this, and I would cut it and edit it to the scene, and which is some people would be really upset by that, some composers, but it was the only way I could sort of demonstrate how I wanted, where I wanted it to come in, how I wanted it to be. So once he got the hang of that, then he kind of went back and then started sending me tracks, and we started playing them and placing them, and making adjustments. Can you slow it here? Can you take out this instrument? It's a very organic, detailed process.
Yeah. And if unless you don't want to give too much away, would you be interested in like giving some more background on the actual sort of traditional songs that were included?
Yeah, the traditional songs are songs that, well, so my mother, when she developed dementia, revealed to us that she had musical ability, which we had no idea. She never sang. She never, we actually found out very late that she could play the piano. Um, she gave us piano lessons. She paid for that for all of us. My brother's a musician, and but during dementia, one day she sat down, like there was a piano in her assisted living. She started playing, and we were just like, "What? Wait, what? This is surreal." And then she would start to spontaneously burst into song. So one of the songs that she really liked was "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes." We had no idea. I don't know what that song means to her, where she's heard it. One of the composers who did just an opening theme said, "Oh, I think that song is from the 30s. That was when it first came out." And so that would place her as a teenager. And they say when people develop dementia, if you play songs from their adolescence, a lot of times that will kind of activate something in the brain. So that would be about right. She was probably a teen in the 1930s. So "Smoke Gets in Your Eyes," the Tennessee Waltz. I can't remember what the others are, but those are the two main ones I think that keep coming back.
Um, so you touched on earlier about sort of how the structure of the film was kind of dictated by necessity and the nature of how you were, had to film it. Can you elaborate a little bit more on, I guess, how, like, what that looked like in terms of the editing process, and like just a little bit more detail on how that all
Yeah.
came together?
So we we had a couple of false starts. I don't know if you call them false starts, but maybe they're not false starts. But we tried to do different things. Like we tried to do verite. I didn't feel that it conveyed enough of the phenomenon, I would say, of like the way that dementia works. It's really hard to communicate that. It looked, I think in the verity version of the film, it looked a little cute sometimes. And I wanted to really show this back and forth kind of nature of her mind. So we kind of stopped that direction. Another time, yeah, so I think we had a couple of attempts with different. We also had some animation at some point because we thought maybe animation would be a good way, but we just didn't. We couldn't raise enough money to really successfully make that happen, unfortunately. And I wanted to finish the film, so we dropped the animation, um, and and then the last iteration was I had an idea to just really work with stills, with photography, but to try to work with them in a it's hard. It's a really tricky thing actually to work. People think you just drop in, you just illustrate the idea, you drop them in, but it's not. It's really kind of a funny back and forth. You don't want it to be too static, but you also want to be able to really have the viewer take in something about that photograph. So, sometimes we like played with a little bit of the composition, cropped it, recropped it. And so we relied on the stills, and I made a template, and I brought that template to the editor, it was Catherine Hollander. And then from that, we kind of built the rest of the film. So I really took the whole structure apart. We did rely on some of the earlier verite scenes that were edited by somebody else. I think it was Linda Hattendorf. A couple of people worked on this film. Linda Hattendorf, Alex Juutalainen, Dita Ruse. So those were some of the editors. But, we kept starting and running out of money and having to go. And during that time, I would start to kind of edit it and re-edit it.
Yeah.
So very labor-intensive process.
Right. So I think it's evident that there is a particular sort of philosophy of caregiving that is central to the film. Can you kind of talk a little bit about maybe what that is and how it influenced your desire to make this film and how it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
maybe was shaped by the process in any way of making the film or any of that?
Yeah. So what I discovered, and there were like a lot of phases in caregiving. The beginning was, why are you acting that way? And, a lot of corrective and being embarrassed because she would say really like embarrassing things and they were wrong. And it was clearly she was out of it. And so I didn't like that. But then what I would find is that kind of made my mother angry and it made it weird between us. And then I realized it was really kind of shutting her down. And what I was trying to fight for was her own sense of self, even though she had dementia. So along the way, I started to realize that the more you listen to somebody and kind of follow her mind, then and just allow, now don't judge it, don't try to correct her and really see where she takes, where she would take us or take me. And then it became really fascinating. And, she started saying things about her past. And some of it could be true. Some of it we don't know. Some of it I think is true because from what she had told me before, but it was just this unfolding of, these many different selves. So I think just allowing people, and accepting the dementia rather than fighting it, rather than thinking, it's a tragedy. Maybe yes, you have to, face that there's loss, but there's also something to embrace. And it is a different person. And hopefully, there are moments that you can kind of connect. And that's kind of what happened is that the less I interfered, the more we connected, and the more I found the joy in the process and the delight and the kind of creativity that was kind of, became really kind of fun and yeah, very, very lively.
Yeah,
One
no,
of the things my mother liked was art. So we did a lot of things with art, museums and shows and this and that actually was really helpful.
yeah, I think that's quite beautiful. You mentioned very early on, sort of like having the idea for the film, sort of the way it came about was sort of you sort of saw the potential for it in those early interactions. Did you eventually kind of have an actual specific goal with making it?
Um, I think it's just to really show another side of dementia that maybe people hadn't seen before, and yeah, that they're that it's important to not just assume that because someone has dementia, it's over. You know, it's kind of, you could think about it in terms of like the way people think about disability, or like are still you still have personhood, right? You're still like things are different, but you're not completely lost. There's somebody in there, and you just have to reach them, right? So yeah, that was yeah.
And so now that I guess the film is complete and people have seen it, I don't know exactly how many, but I know, obviously some people, like a decent amount of folks have seen it. How has that sort of have had people's reactions to it? Um, I don't know. Have they met any expectations that you had? Have they surprised you? Have they given you anything more to think about?
Well, um, I was I don't know. I was worried maybe people would find the film, I don't know, too non-traditional. Would they be able to enter it? Would they find it too slow? I deliberately made a slow film. Um, and people have connected and have been very enthusiastic about it. We've only This is actually November is the big rollout for this film. We had we had a screening at Black Star in the summer in August, but this month is really, we haven't had anything until this month. So Philly Asian, where I'm in San Diego, so San Diego Asian American, it's going to go to Doc NYC on Friday, and then we're going to go to Amsterdam. It's going to be in IDFA the week of the 14th. So yeah, so now we have the big rollout in all these different parts of the country and even internationally. So I'm excited to see that. We were really actually very excited that a lot of the people who are doing cutting edge dementia research are very interested in the film, because they do kind of agree. They feel like the film is in alignment with kind of the newer ways of thinking about how you treat dementia, or just how to embrace the all of the peculiarities of dementia, right, and how to be with somebody and care give them. So that's really been exciting. Some people from UPenn. There's a big study uh, out of, I think there's 9 major research universities in the U.S. that are focusing on Asian. I think it's specifically the Vietnamese community and dementia. So these studies are just unrolling, and now they're kind of reaching out to see. They want to see the film. So tomorrow in San Diego, some of the people are coming from UCSD. Some of the researchers are coming, and there's a cohort of medical students coming. So that's going to be exciting to see how the film lands for them.
That's great. Now the film itself is a lot of things. It's poetic. It's real. It's raw. But there are a lot of points where it's not necessarily direct. Is there anything that you right now would just like to say to folks, either about dementia or about sort of your experience, any sort of message or anything you'd like just people to hear about any of it?
Yeah, I think you know people who have dementia, they have I think as we all age, we kind of have we develop this what I call elder consciousness. It's actually a term my spiritual teacher developed with me, and she said, you have to slow down to hear people and connect with them as they age, because their mind works differently. They're accessing all these layers simultaneously. It's a more complex, kind of way of being. And so just that this sort of connecting with our elders, and valuing their experience, whether they have dementia or not. Slowing down, listening, and valuing your time with your elders, your beloved elders, whether they're your family, whether they're people your neighbors in your community. That just we devalue aging. We're so afraid of aging. So trying to come to terms with that, and our fear of mortality, and our fear of disability, or the loss of abilities that come with aging. I'm still trying to grapple with it too, but yeah, just trying to think about that.
Great. Okay, so we're just gonna start to wrap up, but as we do, I just want to ask you, is there anything new you're working on that you would like folks to know about? Any sort of final thoughts, or yeah, anything, just like, or if people just want to like know more about you, follow your work, where can they do
Yeah,
that?
well, there's a website for the film, wisdomgonewildfilm.com, and a Facebook page, and an Instagram. So, but new projects I'm actually working on developing a documentary. I call it a documentary installation, and trying to work on research. It's based on a body of photographs my father took in Chicago during the Japanese American resettlement period, so right after people got back from camp, and a lot of people went to Chicago. So there's some negatives that I found of his work. So I'm trying to figure out how to create something with that. But I want to do it as an installation in some of the neighborhoods that he shot the original photos in. So
Great. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for hosting this talk and the film, and really being supportive, and for everybody at the festival, all the hard work that goes into launching this festival. It's a big undertaking, so congratulations, and thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Yeah, so for those viewing, want to check in on our other Q&As, you can find our schedule on our website. You can obviously purchase tickets for events, find other events on our website as well. And yeah, thanks for viewing, and thanks to Rea Tajiri.
Thank you, Hassan. Thanks.